Hey, good morning. English 1 students, welcome to class. You're finally hearing something from your teacher. Here we're going to talk about the research paper that you're working on. So what do you think? Should I call Christian Light and tell them we got some good stuff coming that they're going to want to publish? I really have confidence that you're doing a good job, and I hope you're getting some joy out of it. Hope you're finding some good information and having a good experience putting this all together. So let's go over just a few things. Grab your English 1 book and go to page 12, and we're just going to review a few things in your note-taking process. So first of all, with the coronavirus and with libraries being closed, I know I had a call from at least one of you, and yes, if you cannot find a book for your project and you can't go to a library, I'm going to allow you to not have to have a book to draw from. So you can use online sources, encyclopedias. If you did not find a book and now you can't go to a library, you don't have to have a book. Now, if you have books, please use them and please draw information from them. Okay, one more thing that I want to point out. So 8th grade missed a week on their language arts, so that puts them behind 1 week. We might as well stay together. So what that amounts to is you get 1 more week. So right up here, 1 extra week. Project is now due April 7th. So you get an extra week to work on it. It's going to be even better, right? Okay, so just a few things to review when you're doing your note taking. Number 1, make sure you're making a bibliography card for each source that you draw from. And you learned how to do that. Sort your cards out by the slugs. Remember, you're putting those slugs up in the corner, and so you should have stacks of cards that are for certain main topics of that initial rough outline, or subtopics that you may have come up with under that rough outline. So that brings us to the next point. When you sort those cards, try to make sure your stacks are about the same size. So make sure you're researching your main points equally. So if you find yourself, maybe you're talking about a person and you have a whole bunch about the childhood, but you're really weak in some other areas, that's where you need to go do some more research. And finally, you need to try to have at least 30 note cards. That should be close to sufficient to write your paper. And if you have any questions about any of that, I'm at school, so give me a call here today, Tuesday, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. I'd be really happy, because I'd really love to know how things are progressing. Okay, so let's move on now in your book and just look briefly at making the outline. So at this point now, when you get all your notes taken, you need to do the outline. You know how to do outlines, but do it carefully. Organize it just the way you plan to write the paper. Doesn't mean you can't come back and change it, but the point is the outline needs to match your paper. An outline needs to be done in correct format. Study that format carefully. It's not new to you. You'll know how to do that, but let's do it carefully and neatly. And again, I can't emphasize enough, it's going to matter on your grade if your outline doesn't match your paper. So keep those two coherent. All right, the next thing on your job list is to write an introduction. The whole point of an introduction is to catch the attention of the reader. It's like bait. You want to, and this is the same way in speaking or writing, you want to do something in that introduction that will cause the person to say, I want the rest. I want more of this. So they give you a few suggestions. You could use an anecdote. Well, you that have done literature have it over 10th grade. You have it over 9th grade because you know really well what anecdotes are. You could use a rhetorical question or you could use a quotation. Now, what are those? Look just below, and they give you examples of what Kayleen did. So we're talking right here on this part. You could begin with a Bible verse. That's an example of a quotation. You could begin with a quotation from someone involved in what you're researching or the person you're researching. That's an example of a quotation. Excellent way to start. Whets people's appetite for what's to come. A rhetorical question. That happens to be what Kayleen ended up settling on. So if you drop down to her opening paragraph, here's how she begins. How would it be to be blind? So that's an example of a rhetorical question. You don't really expect your audience to answer, but it causes them to think. Yeah, what would that be like? And then you have their attention and they're going to be listening. So here's a person that went through just that and lived life successfully. So what's an anecdote? So an anecdote is a short poem or story. Sometimes it can be something that's kind of humorous, but it's an attention-getting little story or poem to open up your speech or your writing assignment. So here was an example, the poem. Oh, what a happy child am I, although I cannot see. Using a short poem from Fanny Crosby herself. Or a short story of some kind that would illustrate something that would be attention-getting. Those are all good ideas for your introduction. All right, let's flip over to lesson 10 and just talk briefly about acknowledging your sources as you write. So remember, we talked about plagiarism and how important it is that you don't steal someone else's idea. When you use someone else's idea, you need to acknowledge that. And that's what we're doing here. They talk here about at the end of a sentence in which you use the information, you should give a parenthetical citation. Parenthetical means using parentheses or parenthetical items we put parentheses around. Here's the combination here, parentheses, parenthetical. That should consist of the author's last name and the page number of the book. So you're not putting the book title down, just the author's last name and the page number. And just for what it's worth, it says then, the following examples cover most kinds of sources you will need to document. If you have a source you do not know how to document, ask your teacher or consult an MLA handbook. And I told you I was going to get one of these, and I did. I, in fact, have two of them. And so there you have it, MLA handbook. And still has the price sticker on it. I'll get that later. So I have it here at school, but you can't get it. So what this is MLA stands for Modern Language Association. And this is just a group of people who are concerned that language is kept intact and is done properly. They have formed an organization, and I think you can join, you can be a member. And so together they try to establish language norms. And in this case, it's for English. So correct ways to write and do papers, what have you, anything to do with language, doing it the correct way. And so that's what this handbook is. Now, you were told that the method taught in this light unit comes from this. So there you go. If you're interested in that, probably could get your hands on it somehow. All right, so they give you a couple examples here. The one we just talked about, where you simply put the author's name and the page number, put that in parentheses. There are those times when you talk about, in a certain book, a certain author says this. So you don't need to, in that case, give the name of the author and the page number again. You can simply put the page number. So you have an example of that in the middle. Bernard Ruffin said in his biography, see, note, we already said where we're getting this as a part of our paper. So at the end, notice they only put parentheses with 20, page 20. Okay, so one final thing you run into is perhaps in a magazine or maybe even in an encyclopedia article, you don't know the author's name. And so note, in that case, you simply use the title of the work you're citing. So there was this article, probably in a magazine, about Fanny Crosby, or titled Fanny Crosby, and it was on page 752, or apparently that was a book. And by the way, you have 1, 2, and 3 on the next page. That matches up with number 2, so you don't know the author's name. So that's where you're going to simply put the title of the work with page number. And then lastly, sometimes you have 2 authors, so you need to use both last names. You have Marks and Ruffin. And then that would match with number 3 of your assignment on top of the page. Okay, so let's make sure we acknowledge where we're getting our sources. All right, so when you get that all done, you have your outline done, you're ready to start on your rough draft. You worked on your introduction, and now you're ready to go with the rough draft. The important thing with the rough draft is to get it down on paper. And a good thing to do there is simply to let your thoughts flow. And just write as fast as you can write. Better yet, type as fast as you can type. If you can do this on a word processor, so much better. That's definitely the way I would recommend. And simply because if you do it on a word processor, you can print it out, make sure you double space so you get plenty of room. You can print it out, mark all your mistakes. They'll even mark most of those mistakes for you. So often if you have a grammatical problem, something like Microsoft Word will tag that. If you have a misspelling, most of the time all you have to do is right-click. You have ideas for the correct spelling word, and then you can move things around. If you don't like how you said it, you want to move things from one way to another. So much easier. But the point right now with the rough draft, get it down. Just get it down. Don't worry so much about spelling. Don't worry so much about grammar, sentence structure. Just get it down. And then later we'll work on editing and making it look nice. All right, so we're going to conclude with that. And again, if you have any questions, please call. I think about you a lot. Prayed for all of you this morning. And just really hope this is a successful project. So God bless you as you work, and have a good day.